Hi everyone, this is Ms. Rodriguez, Omar, and Mr. Tucker, and this is Concerned Conferences 101. We're just going to give you a few tips on what your conferences should look like and sound like for the upcoming parent or conferences, concerned conferences. Okay, so the first thing that I always do is I always start out with strengths. I start out by asking the students his or her strengths, what the parents believe the student's strengths are, and then I share my strengths. Okay? So, Omar, what do you think you do well at, or what are your strengths as a reader and a writer?
When I read, I get every time I read something, I always think or wonder what's going to happen next, or what is the story going to be like when it ends.
Okay. So that's a great strength as a reader. What about as a writer?
As a writer, I like it how sometimes when I get a prompt that I like, I always focus on what the teacher says or what the prompt is telling me to do.
Awesome. Those are two great strengths as a reader and a writer. Great job. So, Dad, Omar's dad, Mr. Tucker, what do you think Omar's strengths are as a reader and as a writer?
One strength he has is he loves to read. So every time he comes home from school, one of the first things he does is he gets on his computer and he's reading things off of the computer.
And what about as a writer? What do you notice about Omar as a writer?
You know, that's interesting because I don't see him writing very much at home. So it's interesting to hear what he says his strengths are because there's not very many opportunities for him to write when he's at home. So.
Have you ever gotten the opportunity to see some of his, what did you call them, free write, quick write, or prompt writing?
Prompt writing?
When he was in elementary school, I saw a few things, and I thought he had good penmanship, and I thought that he spelled things correctly, and so he has good writing, and he can spell real well.
Okay, great. So, from your teacher perspective, I think one of your strengths, Omar, is that you ask really great questions. But you not only ask the questions, you always go back and answer your questions. All great readers always go back and do that. As a writer, I really like the craft you use in your writing. You know, you make your writing come alive, some of your characters. I can imagine being there with your characters. So that's really awesome. So that's how we really start, is basically everybody getting an opportunity to voice the strengths, asset focused. The next thing that we're going to do is we're going to talk about struggles, concerns, or support based on everybody's voice, everybody's perspective. So Omar, what do you think you need support with as a reader or as a writer?
Sometimes when I get like questions or papers that involve words that I don't really understand, or when it tells me something, like I have to explain something, it kind of gets confusing because sometimes it tells me directions that I think that my head gets all messed up and I can't really understand it.
Okay. What about as a writer? What do you think some of the things you might need support on as a writer?
Sometimes when I'm writing a big paragraph or 3 paragraphs, I kind of, when I have to write something like really detailed, sometimes my brain stops working and I wander off into space sometimes.
Okay. And what about you, Dad? What do you think Omar needs support with as a reader or as a writer?
Well, like I said, when he comes home from school, he gets on his computer, and I see him reading on Facebook a lot. So I don't see him reading books or magazines or newspapers or anything like that very often. So my concern is him being able to access those kind of materials.
Okay.
So I don't see that a lot.
Okay.
And in terms of writing, like I said, I haven't seen very much writing at home, and we haven't had a whole lot of opportunities for him to write. So that might be something that I think about doing, is giving him opportunities to write at home.
So one thing that I noticed that Omar needs support on is really applying some of the things that we do during the I do and the we do that we practice with each other. He needs to start applying that to his own independent reading. So I think like when we talked about inferring unfamiliar words, those are some of those times when your brain starts hurting, you're like, what? Those are when we really need to start implementing some of those strategies to help us figure out some of those words. Okay? And I think as a writer, I think really planning out your writing to help you stay focused and so you're not wandering off in space, those are the things that I think you should work on as a writer moving forward. Okay? So that's talking about the strengths and supports. And it's not always going to sound like that and look like that, but we always want to provide an opportunity for everyone to share their perspective. Going forward, the next thing we want to do is we want to ask if there's any questions in regards to the student. Let the student ask, and if he doesn't have any questions, that's fine. You also let the parent ask. But try to keep the conversation focused, because 9 times out of 10, the parent's going to ask about behavior. If there's a behavior question, you want to be able to support and back up the things that you have implemented to support that behavior. Okay. So, do you guys have any questions? No questions?
No.
If you think of questions later, I'll give you my email and you could email me or feel free to call me and leave a voicemail. Or Omar, just ask me in class. Okay? So what we want to do next is we want to come up with a plan. So moving forward, we know how we're getting student, parent, and teacher support with supporting Omar on what he feels he needs support on, as well as constantly reminding him of his strengths. And so that plan might look like a simple contract, something that we type up, something that we're going to document and provide the parent feedback if the parent wants to get that feedback. But you want to build the capacity of your student and providing that feedback to the teacher, and so it's not only on the student. Okay. And that's it. Look at the camera.